Hey, hi all. So sorry for that glitch. I'm really filling in here for Jim, who was supposed to give this talk today, but could not attend because of some personal emergency. So I'll be doing the talk today for Subex. I hope everyone is safe out there, and I really wish we can go back to our normal life soon and then meet. And we could have done this talk in person. A big thanks to CFCA team for setting up this conference and giving us this opportunity to present. I would also like to put a big thanks to all frontline respondents who has been helping us fight this global pandemic. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Nithin, and I work as a product manager at Subex. For people who have not heard about Subex, a quick introduction about Subex as well. We are a telecom analytics vendor offering risk and analytics products for service providers, and we have been there in the industry for some decades. We have a strength of nearly 900 plus employees, currently all working from home, and we have our products running in more than 100 plus countries, right? And the topic I'm going to talk today is on device risks in the digital world and how using machine learning we could fight these risks. So year 2020 has been all about defying data trends, right? We have seen a lot of new changing data trends and in multiple things, right? It has been a year where all known data patterns have been seen broken, right? We have seen what used to be the norm is no more a norm today, right? And we never know whether we will go back to what was the norm earlier. So when we talk about these, we are looking at new customer behaviors. We are looking at new shopping patterns that has evolved over a period of time, right? And some of these have been life-altering experiences, right? So people who have never ordered grocery online are now ordering groceries online, right? It would have been a much more personal experience where you could go walk into a supermarket and buy your groceries, but that's not possible for some of us at least now, right? So we are hearing that some of the companies also don't intend to go back to or return to their offices, and they would intend to continue working from home even after this goes back or the pandemic is over, right? So what does this mean, right? We have also seen some other trends, and this was mainly one of the key things, which is about online versus offline store purchases, right? So at the start of this pandemic, we saw a huge surge a surge in online transactions and a huge dip in in-store transactions, right? This was something the in-store was actually already fighting against online for some time. But I think this pandemic again gave a big boost, and people have been, as I said, people who have been who have never purchased groceries online are now purchasing online, right? And we believe that this would lead to new user journeys, right? This trend would lead to new user journeys. So I'm just playing a quick video about one of the user journeys that IKEA showed us as part of the iPad launch earlier this year. So iPad got launched at the start of this year, where they had introduced a LiDAR sensor, and it basically showcased how users could purchase their cushion covers and try on their cushion covers or try on different look and feel of their furniture before they purchase on their devices, and how would that work in a kind of an online experience, right? And we believe that this kind of innovation is going to happen in telco as well, or in service providers as well. We believe with the launch of 5G and next generation networks, there is going to be a whole lot of transformation of business models that's going to happen, right? And this would basically mean that communication providers are not just going to be offering just connectivity or let's say data or voice services. They are going to evolve into solution providers. They are going to evolve into solution creators. they are also going to evolve into ecosystem enablers, right? Um, um, and uh, and then this basically means that many of these transactions which used to happen offline would now happen online, the risk teams or the fraud teams have to be prepared to basically ensure that these transactions are protected, and there is no frauds happening on these kind of transactions. So I would be talking, so one of these things is definitely devices. And I believe we will not just tell handsets here, we would mention these as devices. And if you look at the current device distribution, which is already happening with many service providers, they offer a retail store as well as an online store experiences, right? It has been a feedback from our customers that many of them already face higher risks in online store transactions, right? We believe that this is going to only further increase when the number of online transactions are increasing, and more and more people start buying these devices, right? And what we have also seen is actually some of these device costs are also increasing. So we have seen something like Fold, Galaxy Fold, and those kind of devices, which are going to be more normal going forward, touching $2,000 per piece, right? Which basically means one transaction, if gone wrong, would mean higher fraud losses in future, right? Um, so so one of the key aspects that we believe that the risk teams should be or the fraud teams should be taking care of in this is basically the data acquisition, right? So which basically means that how can you enable best fraud controls in this scenario. So we basically what we need to ensure is that you have secured your data sets right? So when you're talking about this kind of user experience, these are some of the data sets that we could identify that you should really get it. And some of these the data sets might be something you would be already using, and some of these things might be where you might not have access to, but we believe would be good that if you have access to, right? So let's go through some of these things. So one is definitely the device fingerprint, where we believe that, okay, when transactions are happening online, you are able to identify and detect what type of devices is involved in this, and you are able to then use whether is it the same customer who's coming back again, or is it a fraudulent customer who's coming back again and then doing this transaction, right? So that kind of data allows you to have much more better fraud controls from your side to fight these kind of transaction controls, right? We could also have other data sets like biometrics data, right? And this biometrics data might include something like Face ID or other types of biometrics where you could collect as part of your online transactions to again maybe validate a high value transaction, right? We could look at social data, right? If you're gathering any of these social data, we could look at how the social data could be used for fraud detection and how that can help in a better fraud detection. Obviously, transaction data is being something which is already being used by many of the teams, and you would look for anomalies and suspicious behaviors in transaction data. And I believe customer data is also something which you already use currently for these kind of transactions, right? So what are the different tools that are available for fraud detection? So one thing definitely is basically is good to have is basically the real-time transaction scoring system. So this is where you have a set of rules and which basically are evaluating your transactions in a much more real-time manner. And these transaction rules basically evaluate different scenarios. These rules could be something like location rules from where your transactions are happening. It could be transaction rules where you're looking, as I said earlier, for transaction anomalies, right? So this is like, is it suddenly happening or looking for specific behaviors of transactions, right? And there could be identity rules which you could have, which would be basically looking for certain identity matches and things like that, right? And ideally, these rules would be best would be best if it is run in a real-time manner, because you would want to have your decisions made in a much more real-time manner, and the end decision should be responded back to the customer in a real-time manner, like having something like a fraud score, which is computed in real time, and then that is deciding saying yes or a no. And that allows to basically control the fraud even before the device is, let's say, shipped from your warehouse, right? Um, but definitely that is also means that that's also striking a balance between having a good customer journey and user experience. You definitely do not want to get into a fight with your marketing team on this. So it is also about how you devise your rules in such a way that it does not majorly impact your customer journeys, right? Um, Another good set of controls that you could have is definitely machine learning models, right? So this is where when you have your online transaction data coming in, you could pass that transaction data through multiple machine learning models, where machine learning models evaluate the transactions for fraud risk, right? And that would basically mean machine learning would look at various aspects of the incoming data, evaluate that data for fraud risk, and from there it would then decide a fraud score by which you could then take a decision whether this order is a good order or a bad order, or even let's say you could refer that order for a manual review for your analyst, and then the analyst would be able to look at that and then take a decision whether you would want to process that order or not. So when you talk about machine learning models, and machine learning models could basically work on multiple feature sets. So again, these are some of the feature sets that we have identified would be helpful in evaluating when a model runs. So this would include location parameters. It would include social presence parameters. It could have multiple delivery parameters. So for example, it could be on where is the delivery address, what type of delivery is it going to be, and things like that, right? So one important aspect of machine learning model which works is basically is that there are three aspects which comes in, right? So one is definitely domain. So this is where I think all the current fraud teams really excel in, right? So what is the business scenarios that you need to be monitored? What are the different products aspects that needs to be there? So different domain aspects of the things is what we definitely can do in the machine learning model. The second is basically how good the algorithm needs to be, right? So this is about tuning different aspects of algorithms and letting that algorithm run well in a real-time manner. And the third aspect is definitely the technology aspect, which is deals to how fast you can run these machine learning models, how you can scale these machine learning models and be efficient. And again, as I said earlier, you would want to have a good customer experience as far as the overall transaction goes, and you do not want to basically fight against that customer experience, because that's something which would deter the customer from coming online and then making that transaction. So one of the projects that we have done recently was basically implementing a machine learning model in a much more real-time scenario, where we were able to basically read the data, which is basically the customer document data in real time. Basically do an OCR on top of that, detect various credentials of that document, and then use that for matching against the base reference of, let's say, a blacklist, right? So you would basically read, you would take a live data from the camera, you would see what is the face of the customer, you would then scan the document, you would then detect the photo on the document, match that photo against the live feed which is coming from camera, also validate the document details, and then look at what are the different matches which is possible on the document against different types of blacklist matches. So this is one of the controls that we have implemented recently, and we saw that it was having a good impact on fraud detections and fraud controls that we could have. So just to summarize, we believe that having a plethora of risk controls and fraud controls in real-time transactions can really help in fighting this online transactions in a better manner, and especially for device, as we said earlier, the cost of the transaction is going high. And it is good that you have multiple sets of controls that is implemented to basically have this transaction monitoring in real time. And we are able to control that, right? So I would like to walk through a customer case study, which we basically had done recently, and quickly summarize that. So in this particular case, this was basically a tier 1 operator in Europe, where there was a case where they were already selling handset transactions online. And there were different types of risks that was identified, right? So there was risk which was pertaining to processes. There was risk pertaining to, let's say, different types of quality of the data. There were risks pertaining to different processes, different aspects of the process, which basically means that there were some processes which were set, which were basically enabling the fraudsters to misuse that and then further detect or further make transactions online. And by which they were able to defraud the network. And by having a combination of rules and machine learning techniques monitoring this system, monitoring these kind of transactions, we were able to save nearly $2.5 million of savings in a matter of nearly 3 months, right? And as I said, this is a big impact. This was a big impact for them, mainly because that this was there was actually earlier they were able to do this, but it was not happening in a much more real-time manner. Implementing a much more real-time transaction control helped them to fight this in a much more better manner. And they were able to save nearly $2.54 million in a matter of 3 months, right? So a key takeaway which I would want to leave here. So definitely 3 things which I would want to leave with all the fraud teams, right? So the first one is definitely automate heavily. By automation, I mean that whichever processes you have or whichever controls you have, you would want to look at how you could automate that more and have multiple automation controls, which is possible. Definitely second one is grow your arsenal of controls, which is basically have multiple tool sets within your arsenal to fight. This could be transaction rules, or it could be machine learning models which you could use, or it could be, let's say, as I said earlier, face recognition or something like that, which you could use to fight your fraud detection technique. Right? And the third one is definitely be agile, be quick, try to detect or try to make your changes or try to make your transaction controls adopt to your business requirements as fast as possible so that you are able to save faster, right? So that's what we would wanted to show today. Thanks once again, thanks a lot for CFC for giving us this opportunity. Sarah, any question and answers, I'd be happy.